Hi, everyone. Welcome to this mini workshop on multi tiered systems of support and the essential teams needed to have a healthy and functioning MTSS system and framework at your school or district. Well, I've been working side by side with schools and districts since 2006. I was first a literacy coach, an instructional coach, and working with the schools that were struggling the most in the state that I was living in at the time, Arizona, and went in regularly working with the internal coaches, doing instructional observations, giving teachers feedback, looking at data, working together collaboratively as a team with the principals, the coaches, and the teachers to see really dramatic turnarounds in student performance. And then from 2010 to 2016, I actually oversaw the professional development for MTSS of a statewide initiative. The results there are documented in two peer referee journal articles that I'm really proud of, where we saw statistically significant improved reading outcomes for students in first and fifth grades. And that was across over 150 schools, I believe. I'd have to go back and check now, but I bring all of that knowledge along with my education and my current role as a research faculty to help guide intentional implementation of MTSS. I'm just going to walk you through the foundations of successful MTSS teams and the different teams that you should have in your school as you're getting started. So, this is an inspirational quote that I like to start with because I think it is so spot on when it comes to MTSS. So, from Mark Udall, he says, "You don't climb mountains without a team. You don't climb mountains without being fit. You don't climb mountains without being prepared. And you don't climb mountains without balancing the risks and rewards. And you never climb a mountain on accident. It has to be intentional." And that's what MTSS Solutions is all about, intentional implementation with a team. So by the end of this presentation, my goal is for you to feel more comfortable and clear and confident in your MTSS knowledge. So, I'm going to give you an overview of the stages of implementation and also do an introduction to the four essential MTSS teams and provide you with the function of each of those teams. But really, the most important thing you can do right now, if you're just getting started in MTSS, is establish your MTSS school-wide leadership team. That's really that essential base camp team that you need to prepare for before you head off on your big mountain climb, which is the MTSS implementation process. So here's just a quick overview of the stages of implementation. You don't have to memorize this, but I think it's really important to understand where you are in the process of implementing MTSS. And there's different components of MTSS as well. So you might be, in the early stages for literacy MTSS, but you've been implementing, say, PBIS, positive behavior interventions and supports for a long time. So you're further along in the implementation there. So at the bottom, you could see the initial stages are exploration and installation. Exploration is all about deciding, are we going to do MTSS? Are we actually going to begin this process? Do we have a need? Let's look at our data, what's working, what's not working, and make a choice about what initiatives we need to pursue. And a part of exploration is also understanding what programs you might need to let go of. We call that de-implementation. So if there's district-wide initiatives or an initiative at your school that's been there for a long time and is kind of fizzing out, then that's something in the exploration phase that your team will discuss as well. Next, in the installation phase, you're just planning. You're preparing and bringing together all your materials that you're going to need for that mountain climb. So you're making the menus, you're deciding how much food to buy. In the case of installation, you're really thinking about what programs do we already have in place? What assessments do we have? What expertise do we have within our building, within our district? Are we going to need external training or can we do it with just in-house training? So those are the types of questions you're asking at the installation phase. I will say in this transition between installation and initial implementation, you're also thinking about sharing information across the schools, across the teachers so that they're not all of a sudden surprised when they walk in on the first day of school and they hear, oh, we're an MTSS school. So installation also involves um, readiness, this idea of readiness, and making sure that the MTSS leadership team is communicating effectively with the instructional staff, with the office staff, with parents, that we're engaging in this process to learn about how we will implement MTSS, what it is, why we're doing it, etc. So, initial implementation and full implementation are really continuums of each other. We really think of initial implementation as the first three, sometimes the first 3 to 5 years of MTSS implementation, and full implementation sometimes really doesn't happen until the 5 to 7 year marker. And so that's why at the top of the stages of implementation, you can see sustainability. Really, sustainability is guiding us all along the way, as are adaptations we might make in order to make sure that MTSS fits our school, fits our skills, fits our students and our community. So we want to have that contextual fit, and that's the way we do that is through adaptations. So these are the stages of implementation. And you might consider, where is your team on this journey? You can see if you're getting ready for a big backpacking or camping trip. Exploration really starts at planning at home, planning for future trips, if we're going to continue to use this analogy. And then installation is like just the packing for camping. You're not there yet, but you're getting excited. You're pulling all your bags together, your supplies together, and you're loading up the car, the van. You got all your snacks ready to go. Now, initial implementation is when maybe you've only been camping a few times. So, oh gosh darn it, we forgot our lighter again. So, it's going to be hard to get this campfire started. Or, maybe we forgot the rain fly for the tent. So, our tent got a little wet in the morning. So, it's not really a practiced skill yet. Whereas full implementation, yeah, a master backpacker, master mountain climber, or camper, you are camping comfortably year round. You got all your gear, you've got all your supplies, and a little snow or a little rain isn't going to stop you. Now, sustainability is when that expert camper level is achieved and you're at the top of the mountain. You've made it past all the peaks, all the switchbacks, and all of these skills culminate to allow you to stay out on the mountain longer, but allow you to keep your MTSS skills building and growing and having the intended impact, which is greater outcomes for students and easier decision making process for teachers as well. Teachers feeling confident about their role in MTSS and knowing that they have the support of leadership at the school building and ideally at the district level. And the support of the ideally at the district level as well. And the support of the support of administrators at the district level as well. So now we're going to get into what are the different teams that your school needs if you're setting up your MTSS. Now, some of these teams you're already going to have, okay? So that's the good news. So don't feel like everything has to start over from scratch. Instead, you will identify the teams that you already have, consider what the functions of the team are, what the membership of the teams are, and maybe just make some alterations or make the purpose of that team even more explicit to all the team members, okay? So I put PLC up here, professional learning communities. A lot of schools have those. It can be a grade level team. It can be teachers with maybe a similar interest, kind of like a committee at the school. So both of those are important and relevant, and you can kind of configure this one as it best fits for your school. But the purpose of this team, as you can see, is to have that primary emphasis on prevention and the implementation of high quality universal classroom instruction, high quality universal expectations for behavior, high quality assessment for all those universal screening. So these teams are really working together. They've got collaborative instructional planning, and they're meeting often. One big challenge that schools face here is maybe not having the time set aside for these grade level teams or PLCs, and teachers are trying to scramble and talk to each other in the hallways. Really, an optimal system is having days where you have an early release or a late start, and the morning and afternoon time when students are out of the building, teachers get the chance to meet together to plan, review data, and collaborate. So this team is the membership includes your grade level teachers, also an instructional coach. Obviously, an instructional coach can't make it to every grade level every week, but hopefully they can rotate through the grade levels so that their grade level teachers are able to ask the instructional coach some questions or get feedback. Same as with the specialists, that they can rotate through depending on the needs, and the same thing with the principal, that they're also able to roll, or an administrator if there's questions or feedback that the teachers need to give about a certain policy or the way a schedule is working out, or if they need more instructional aids at a given time to help out with kind of tier two supplemental supports in the classroom, then you've got the administrator coming to your meeting on a regular basis so you can ask those questions. Next up, we have the Tier 2 Intervention Assistance Team. Sometimes these teams can be called a student success team. I've seen these teams called kind of like maybe a check and check out team. That's a type of tier two intervention. And so some schools just call it check and check out team because that's really their main tier two offering that they have for students. But the purpose of this team is to really oversee the implementation of integrated and supplemental interventions that are standardized for small groups of students. The whole point of Tier 2 is that these interventions are standardized, they are not individualized. Now, an individual student through the tier two team, the data will be looked at and the team will decide what's the best intervention that's most aligned with that student's needs. So in that way, it's an individual decision, but they're going to a small group or some supplemental support that a classroom teacher is offering directly in the classroom. This team depends on the size of the school, but often, most likely, they're meeting weekly, and they're alternating between maybe individual student problem solving and action planning and kind of the overall intervention systems coordination. Say you have a check in, check out classroom, and now you're accepting more students into that tier two intervention because it's October, November, and you need more adults in the classroom at the end of the day to check students out. And so that would be something that would be talked about by the tier two intervention assistance team. You might call it a tier two coordination team. So something to consider. And the membership should be led by an instructional coach or a lead interventionist. Interventionist representatives, maybe there's a special ed instructional aide that helps out in the check-in, check-out classroom in the afternoons. And so that's a good person to include. You don't have to include all the paraprofessionals, but having one who works on interventions is useful. Also, other specialists, again, an EL specialist, English language development teacher can rotate through, and again, having an administrator, or if you can have like an assistant principal or a teacher on a special administrative assignment assigned to this team regularly, that's going to be great. School psychologists, special ed teachers, I've also seen them on these teams as well. Next up is the Tier 3 Individualized Intervention Team. And this team is really doing this individual student problem solving. And the field is moving towards calling that data-based individualization. This is really where, if your school is using RTI and MTSS interchangeably, this is really more where RTI is happening between this tier 2, tier 3 world. And so this is, it encompasses all the different types of interventions, right? Academics, behavior, social, emotional. There's a link here that specifically talks about database individualization, and it's from the National Center for Intensive Intervention. So I suggest you looking at that if you are on a Tier 3 individualized intervention team or a Tier 3 coordination team. Some people also call it that. The meeting frequency is definitely going to be weekly. These at the tier 3 level, you're looking at different types of data, and that data is going to be reviewed every week, sometimes every day, depending on who's delivering that intervention. This will depend upon school size. And then the membership here is led by the intervention specialist. It might be a special education teacher, it might be a school psychologist, other specialists. A speech language pathologist might pop in occasionally as needed to talk about a specific student. So it's totally possible that some of these students might already be eligible for special education, but it's not a requirement that students have that eligibility in order to receive tier 3 supports. Um, I've also seen it where the grade level homeroom teacher will come to this meeting just if one of the students in their classroom is being discussed. It is a good idea to have classroom teacher representation on both the tier 2 group and the tier 3 group. Tier 2 group, you might separate it out, especially for elementary school, like a lower elementary teacher and an upper elementary teacher, just to represent the teacher voices when it comes to interventions. Next up, you might want to think about where is your team on this journey for each tier, right? There's a lot of steps in the MTSS process. And that's why we say, initial implementation takes 3 to 5 years. Full implementation is often 5 to 7 years. So your team might be or your school might be at the exploration phase for tier 1, or excuse me, exploration for tier 3 and behavior for social emotional behavioral supports. You're just trying to figure out what are those resources that you can offer students. So you're figuring out what are the largest challenges the students face and identifying the supports needed. In the installation, maybe your school is at tier 1 for behavior for installation. You want to implement it, so you're just kind of gathering, planning for the rollout, the staffing, everything you're going to need to do a good job of that implementation. Maybe for tier 2 of behavior and reading, you're a Title I school, you've been doing this for a little while, so you're in that 3 to 5 year range of implementing your tier 2 behavior and reading interventions. Now, maybe you're one of those schools that's been implementing really high quality science of reading, tier 1 reading instruction for some time. And so you would consider yourself at full implementation. And along with that, perhaps you've got a really dialed in tier 3 intensive supports for academics. You've been doing that for a long time successfully. And so you're at that sustainability phase for that. So, this is just an example of how you can think about the phases of implementation, the stages of implementation, along with the different parts of your multi tiered system of support. Now, when it comes down to it, the team that is ultimately responsible for all of these pieces and coordinating all of this together is the MTSS school-wide implementation team. So, the purpose of this team, as you can see, is to oversee all of it, the integrated multi-tiered approach for academics, behavior, and social emotional well-being. So, some activities that this team will engage in include planning the professional learning calendar, um, also just keeping on top of the coaching and how much coaching different maybe different grade levels might need or want, or professional learning needs that are offered to grade level representatives. And this team is also going to report out regularly to all staff about the MTSS fidelity, keeping all staff informed of where the school is in the rollout of these different components of an MTSS process. This team will also really facilitate the communication about MTSS to parents and also give information back to district leadership, because it's important for district leadership to know what's going on in the schools and for the schools to be able to give information to district leadership so that you can get that cycle. We call it the PIP PEP cycle. So we've got this PIP PEP cycle where we have the practice informing the policy and the policy enabling or facilitating the practice. That's really critical to have that communication between the school level implementation teams and the district level implementation team. And so someone, a representative from this MTSS school-wide team, would be giving that information back to the district level. Thanks so much for joining me on this MTSS journey. I want you to know that I'm rooting for you, I'm cheering for you. I've been doing this a long time, and patience is absolutely a virtue when it comes to MTSS. Patience and planning and intentional implementation is required for success. I look forward to working with you and serving you in whatever capacity I can. Go team MTSS. Thanks for being an MTSS champion.